Hi, and welcome to the Brighter Days podcast, hosted by Suicide Prevention Middlesex-London. My name is Elora,
And I'm Rebecca.
and we are members of the council. We are a nonprofit voluntary group of people passionate about suicide prevention in our community. Some of us have lived experience with suicide loss or suicide themselves, and others are part of the community settings, organizations, and community services across our city. So thanks so much for joining us today.
It's our hope to work and interview individuals who live in the space of suicide education, prevention, and intervention. As Alora said, we also hope to speak with individuals with lived experience, suicide exposure, and those on their journey within grief and loss. We're really excited to have our first guest here with us today, Jennifer, and I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself and her book.
Thank you, Rebecca and Elora. My name is Jennifer Egleston, and I'm really pleased to be here today. And I thank you guys so much for inviting me to do this. I am an elementary teacher. I teach here in London. I'm also an author, and I self-published my first book called Grief is Like a Tidal Wave just about a year ago. And since then, I've been busily trying to get it out into the world, into bookstores, connect with people, and that kind of thing. So it's been quite a journey for me.
Well, thank you so much. As we prepare, Jennifer, Alora and I have a series of questions that we're going to work through, and I'm going to kick us off. So the first question to you, Jennifer, is, what was the inspiration behind your book?
So in my family, we were faced with a great deal of grief and loss in a relatively short period of time. It began in the fall of 2018 when my mom, who I was really close to, was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal pancreatic cancer. And this, sorry, this diagnosis came completely out of left field. My mom had been extremely fit and healthy, and so we were completely blindsided by this. And when somebody that you love is given that kind of diagnosis, you really do grieve right then. And for our children, it was their first experience with grief. And so we were very honest with them. We told them about her diagnosis, her prognosis, how, things would be. And so it was a very, very difficult time. She began her chemotherapy treatments right away. She responded really well to them. And so we kind of settled into this new absurd kind of new normal that happens. And then we kind of began to breathe again because she was responding. So there was hope. And then a few months after that, in February of the following year, 2019, we lost my brother-in-law to suicide.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
So that was, his loss was devastating for us. It just can't be overstated. My children adored him. And so the hole that he left, it won't ever heal. And this, I know you guys know, is a completely different kind of grief. It's a complicated grief. It leaves you with all sorts of questions that can't ever be answered.
Yeah.
And so again, we walked alongside our children in their grief, and we did our best to support them through this. And while at the same time, processing our own grief. And I can tell you that has been by far the hardest thing I've ever done.
mhm.
And then a few months after that, we also lost my husband's grandmother. And, grief doesn't care about what age somebody is when you lose somebody. it's just loss, right? And so she was also a very important part of our family, and my children were very close to her. And so off we went to another funeral. And, I remember looking at these pictures of our family and thinking about how it was shrinking. And then not that long after that, my father-in-law was also diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, and he began his treatment. And then this was around the time that COVID hit. And so we actually weren't even able to see my mom and my father-in-law because of that. And so, things progressed. My father-in-law passed away in 2020. And throughout all of this, my mom was continuing with her treatments. She was just, she had the doctors completely baffled, and because she was doing so well, responding so well. And she was just doing her utmost to give us the gift of time.
Mm.
And then in the autumn of 2023, she passed away after 5 years of intense chemotherapy treatment. And so through all of this, my children became very wise in a way that I wish they hadn't needed to. And,
Mhm.
they had way, way too much and way too soon. And, when you're a kid and you understand the gift of being able to say goodbye to somebody, that tells you a lot.
Mm.
And so for me, my grief wasn't just, the losses that I had suffered. It was also seeing my children in their grief, my husband, just basically seeing it in the eyes of everybody I love the most. And so at that point, that's when I was like, I need to do something with all of this pain. And so that's when I turned to creativity.
Mm. Wow, that
Mhm.
is a lot of an accumulation in terms of loss and having so little control over any of the situation and also, feeling the pain and the sorrow and all the vulnerability that must come and watching the young ones do it as well.
Yes.
Um, and it's not lost on me, Jennifer, the emotion I hear in your voice, and I hope we care and we respect it. Um, it makes me think about like the first page of your book, actually, where you write, grief is a sadness, an unbearable sadness that feels like it is taking over. And I wonder, at the time and having sort of little control over the circumstance and being able to see people because of the pandemic, did it feel like it was just taking over?
Oh, absolutely. There were so many people during that time who were, devastated with COVID, right? It was very difficult for a lot of people. For us, like my husband and I, we were kind of, I don't want to say happy about it, but we felt comfortable with it because we had our kids here. We were here. We could kind of keep everybody safe in a sense, um, which is kind of like a weird thing, I realize. But I think because of all the things that had happened and, like you said, so little control, it's, there was a safety there, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it's strange at all. Like, keep all the folks close when it seems like things are out of control or loss is imminent or people are just needing to be at home and getting the hugs and supporting one another. Um,
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure.
and
Yes.
so when you think about some of these things, um, what was sort of your experience in sort of encapsulating these many losses and doing something with it by creating your book?
Well, I really wanted. I, I guess the thing was that when you're a parent, you want to help your kids. You want your kids to be happy. You want to not see them suffer. You want all those things. And with something like this, obviously, like I can't take that grief away. I can't fix it. So the only thing that I felt that I could do, and I really had this very strong um, urge, need, desire, whatever, that I needed to do something. And so I thought, okay, I can't fix it for them, but I can create something that kind of grew from our collective grief. And in doing that, it could possibly help them and possibly help others as well, including myself. So that's what I decided to do in creating my book. And I'd always been like, I've always been a person who writes. I had just never done anything with it. I just, would write and then just, leave it in a book or put it in a drawer or whatever. But when I wrote this, I had this very strong sense that I needed to put it out in the world. And that was the first time I've ever felt that way about my work. So it was, it was a very interesting process. And I tend to write in my head. Like I go over things in my head a lot. I come up with an idea, I think about it, I edit it, I rework it, all those things in my head before it ever goes on the paper. So when I write it on the paper, it usually comes out pretty quickly. And so that's how this book was. And so I wrote my first draft, and then I walked away from it for many months. And I couldn't, the ending wasn't quite there, but most of it was there. And then I walked away from it for lots of time. And then when I came back to it, I did a few small edits and fixed the ending. And then I was like, yeah, I need to make this happen.
Mm-hmm. I'm also a parent, and I totally hear you and resonate with the idea of grief is happening, and usually in many domains of my parenting, I can fix things, and this is not something I can fix, right? They fall and they scrape their knee, we clean up the wound, they have a disagreement at school, we help them navigate it. And while we can help them navigate grief is their own, right? They're going
Yeah.
to experience that loss individually. And you mention in your book, like grief feeling all of the small hurts you've ever had all at once. And I thought that was powerful. And so I want to ask, how did you navigate your own grief tidal wave?
Oh, well, that's not something that really ever stops. It's
Oh.
just, because grief is, as you know, it's just this journey that kind of ebbs and flows, and you kind of just take it, right? So what I do is I try to take each moment as it comes. That's my kind of really short answer. And sometimes out of the clear blue, and sometimes, for no apparent reason, those waves come over you and you're literally brought to your knees. So, and there's no telling when that might happen. And so for me, when those times come, I do try to kind of allow myself to sit with it, to be with that, to feel it. Obviously, there's times when that's just not possible. And so you carry on and you put it away for another time. But I really do try to do that as part of my navigating. The other thing that I do, and I've always done this, is I really have made a very strong point of practicing gratitude. So I'm grateful for many things, even in loss, I'm grateful, right? So, for example, I mean, I miss my mom every single day, but I am so grateful that I had her, that I was close to her my whole life, that we got those 5 extra years with her even after her diagnosis. A lot of people are not that lucky. So that I think is something that's really important. Um, and the other thing that I do is I still do lots of art and creativity. I'm constantly exploring and trying different things. And really, after putting my book out there and going to my book signings and meeting people like you two and other people I've spoken to, all of that has actually helped me to navigate my grief journey as well. It's all become part of it, especially when I'm told that my book is helping people. That has just, made it that much more important to me. Um, so I think that's a really big part.
Yeah. And you mentioned that grief is ongoing, right? In the sense that there are better days and sometimes there's more difficult days. And I imagine that memories come up when maybe you least expect it because of something you weren't expecting. Um, and I think it's really brave, right? When you said that, like, I take it, I take it in, and sometimes I have to package it for another day. But I think it's so easy for the human mind to sort of, when we have a feeling or an experience or a memory or whatever it is, a thought, that we can package it and we can put it on the shelf for a while. But, you're choosing differently, right? And we're wondering, because your book is beautiful, right? Not just sort of the written word and the essence of the message, but it is a beautifully decorated book. And all the
Thank
written
you.
word, the poetry, the prose, the watercolor is really something that I wasn't expecting. And my apologies if I hadn't done my homework before picking up the book. But we're wondering, like, what can you give to others, and in terms of some advice on how you feel creativity can help someone along their own grief journeys? Like, what has been helpful for you?
I mean, I think the arts and creativity in general are like so helpful for healing in so many ways. So for me, like I said, I wrote this, I knew I needed to get it out there. And then I had this very like strong sense that I wanted watercolor paintings to go with it. And I was adamant about it. I knew exactly what I wanted. And so, my family, they urged me to just try. I had never painted. I, had certainly never used watercolor. I'm not a painter, or I had never been. Um, and so, but I wanted, like, it was important to me. So my family was like, just try, just experiment. There's no wrong way, whatever. So I took those words and that's exactly what I did. So I sat there and I just started experimenting and learning how to paint. And, it wasn't something I expected, but as I started to do that, I actually like, I love watercolor. I love doing it. And there was so much healing in making those paintings for me because when I was doing that, it was like I could just not necessarily think, but just feel and allow those really intense, overwhelming emotions to come out in the paintings. And so on any given day, when I had done my painting, you could kind of see where I was in my grief.
Mm,
Um, and and so that became really, really powerful for me doing that. And I just, like I said, I love watercolor. And so even though it started out as this thing that I was doing, for this book about grief, which obviously is heavy and all of those things, um, little by little, this joy crept in because of this just, finding this outlet and figuring out how to use it in a way that, allowed me to heal. And so I think that when people are willing to try something creative, and like creativity can be anything, like it's not limited to, things like painting or playing an instrument or something like that. It can be anything. We're really only limited by our imaginations in that. And so I think when people are willing to try to do that, it can allow them to have a positive outlet to like feel their grief in a way that's a little bit gentler in a sense. Like it's kind of like, to me, like you're not looking at it head on. It's like you're looking at it sideways.
mhm,
And so it's sort of like it softens the edges. It's like your grief passes through this medium instead of just, being this raw, raging thing,
mhm,
right? And then from that, you're releasing your emotion and you're also creating something. And this, whatever this something is that you create, it might be something worthwhile. It might be something that could help somebody else. It might be something that's absolute rubbish and you're going to toss it away. But that isn't really the point. The point is the process and the fact that you're releasing all of this emotion and allowing yourself to feel those deep feelings of grief without, you know, just, I don't know, suffocating from them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Does
And
that
we
make sense?
often, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And, in our North American society too, like sometimes we put confines around what grief looks like or how people grieve, or like this is how you grieve. And so I love to hear along this journey and of pain and sorrow and reflection, there was also joy to be found, and gratitude to be had, even though I imagine it was painful at the same time.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. As often things aren't just one or the other, right?
No.
So much of life is like that.
Mhm. And grief certainly is the gray. It's not
Yeah.
something that's black or white, and that can be really hard for people to grasp. And what I so appreciated about your book, Jennifer, was how you kind of pulled the words and those feelings out of my heart, you know? It can be really difficult to put words to what you might be feeling when you're in that grief tidal wave.
Hmm.
And, there you were naming things that I was like, that's it. To share something from your book of like watching the sun go out, never to shine again. And I have goosebumps reading it because it's so true. I went through a significant sudden loss, losing my dad to suicide. And, you know, it's that light that's taken from you. And yet you have to get up the next day and the next day, and the sun keeps rising, and you're still pondering, well, why am I getting up each day to see the sun and that person's not here with me? They're not seeing it. So it's really powerful, the things that you're sharing, not just with us, but in your book that can really validate people's experience in that gray. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. I really wanted it to be a book that was like accessible for anybody. So, regardless of age, like I said, I wrote this with my kids in mind, but it's certainly not just a kid's book. Um, I've found that it's mostly adults who are drawn to it and who have given me amazing feedback, like what you just said. That it's helpful for them. And I think we all know that when you're in the deep throes of grief, you certainly can't concentrate on something that's a big wordy text.
Mhm.
And so I wanted something that was just very simple, that if you were not in the space even to read any of the words, you could just feel the colors and just sit with it, right? And then go back to it. And I also wanted something that had some hopefulness in it, and I tried to bring that out as the book goes through.
Mhm. Yeah, it's even that sounds like a wave to me, sitting in those feelings, them washing over you as you read the book, and then putting it down. It's kind of like when that wave, takes itself back into the ocean.
Mhm.
Um, and for you, I'm curious, now that you've written this book and, you're able to offer it to those around you in their grief journeys, were there any, works of art, or fiction or books that stood out to you that provided some peace that you're hoping that your book provides to others?
Um, it's a good question. I I'm a really avid reader. I read a lot,
Mm.
um, mostly fiction. So I have to say, I didn't read and I haven't read any books that were specifically about grief, um,
Mhm.
for whatever reason. But one author that I love is Frederick Backman. And I don't know if you've read any of his books, but they're so authentic. And he deals with these, themes of grief and loss. And I've found his novels to be really helpful. I remember reading Anxious People not that long after we had lost my brother-in-law. And I just remember thinking, yeah, he gets it. Some people just get it. And but the way he deals with grief and loss is just in such a way that it feels right. He has complete compassion and there's humanity there, but he even uses humor. And there's just this real human rawness that, again, it's like he just completely gets it. So that has been something for me. And the other person is a musician named Nick Cave. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but my husband introduced me to him, and he very much speaks about grief through his music, and his writing through a platform that he has called the Red Hand Files. And in the Red Hand Files, people can send him a question, and then he answers some of them, but he reads all of them.
Mm.
And he has suffered significant losses in his life, and his music is amazingly beautiful. And I remember the first time watching him, like we were watching a video of him on the TV, and it was actually almost unbearable to watch it because
Mm.
his sorrow was so um, deeply felt that even through not even a live performance, it was just emanating off of him. I've since seen him perform live, which was also amazing. So I think examples like that just show that bravery and that courage in grieving, putting your grief out into the world and trying to find the beauty there and making something that's beautiful out of sorrow.
Yes, when, it's hard to do. Grief is messy and anything beyond perfect, and yet we can still make something of it, whether that's written word or song, and people resonate with that. So I certainly will have to check out those suggestions, because in grief journeys, they can feel very isolating. And I'm not, from hearing your story, it sounds like that was the case for you and why it was so helpful to cling to family, especially your husband and kids during COVID, because that's what you had, when the world was shut down and the feelings of grief were so hard. At the end of the day, you had that love and family around you to cling to. Uh,
Mhm.
for you, because it's been a journey, and I like to use that word as it symbolizes that it's not something that's one and done, you know, it's not over
Absolutely.
yet, that we're
Mhm.
walking alongside grief. And that can be a long journey, you know. Um, for you, what do you think stands out for you of what you tell your past self who might be starting those journeys back in 2018, hearing that sudden news about your mom? What would you tell that past self?
Um, that's a tough question.
Mhm.
Um, I think I would start by saying to be kind and gentle to yourself, um, to allow yourself some time and some grace to learn to navigate your grief, which is actually your new reality. Um, I would explain that grief will definitely, without a doubt, bring you to your knees some days. And On those days, it'll be absolutely brutal.
Mhm.
But over time, it kind of becomes, I always say that it's like you take your grief and you mold it into something that's more manageable to carry.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
doesn't leave you. You always have it. It's a part of you. Um, and there are actually some beautiful parts about that too, because you look at things differently, right? Um, it's part of the human experience. So it can make you be a more complete human in a sense, I think sometimes.
Mhm.
Uh, but you have to mold it so that you can carry it, so that it doesn't just knock you down all of the time. And so I would just tell my past self that, and I would tell them to surround themselves with people who understand and who get it and who support you, because sometimes those people are hard to find,
Mhm.
Mhm.
sadly. Um, yeah, I think those would be the big things. Because up until then, up until 2018, I mean, I'd been really fortunate. And I think a lot of people, and I still am, I shouldn't say up until then, but in terms of grief, and I think it's like that for a lot of people. They're fine, they're going along tickety boo. You don't necessarily think about it too much because you don't have to. And then suddenly everything changes. And, that's like for us, I remember we just wanted the page to turn for it not to be something that was happening to our family again. Um, and because it just was so many things, it was compounded. And, my husband and I have been together since we were teenagers. So, um, you know, his seeing his family just
Mhm.
faded from four people to two in such a short time was just it's devastating. So I would think I would tell my past self to kind of be prepared,
Mhm.
um, but be kind. Be kind to yourself. Don't expect too much out of yourself and expect you to be at a certain point at a certain time and always good and always strong, because it's not like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm hearing that, we should give ourselves grace and
Mhm,
patience as we take those first steps into something that we might not have had experience with before. It's kind of like wearing, um, you know, glasses that you've been given. You didn't have to wear them before, and yet now you do for the rest of your life. And we might have times where we can take a break and take those sunglasses off and, you know, breathe, just as your book shares. And there's other times where it feels like those glasses are stuck on very tightly.
it's a good
So
analogy.
I love hearing from you that, going back to those basics of showing ourselves kindness, surrounding ourselves with people that, are our safe space where we can be sad, happy, angry, frustrated, no matter what the emotion is. So I think those are very helpful reminders for our listeners, um, whether they're starting that grief journey, or they're in the midst of it, like most of us.
Mhm,
And, looking to the future, you've learned so much as you shared. It's changed you, these losses or these hardships. What do you think, you know, you would want to tell your future self who might be looking back at these hard times right now?
I think I'd still start with the same thing. Be kind to yourself. Um, but I also think I would remind myself about how fortunate I was, that I'd been lucky enough to have loved so deeply, that
Mhm.
I also felt grief so deeply, because one wouldn't exist without the other. So that's a privilege.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes. a huge privilege that, to grieve somebody is to know that there was so much love there. And now we don't have that physical, person or presence for that love to go. So how can we, still keep that love to ourselves or those around us that are along the ride with us?
Mhm.
Mhm. And, what drew us to sparking, this podcast Brighter Days and having guests like you, Jennifer, be a part of this process was that a lot of these conversations are not being talked about. That we're scared to talk about them, and particularly like our North American society, Rebecca mentioned earlier. Um, we shy away from the hard topics about grief because there's fear around death and dying. There's fear about losing loved ones, of course, because it's something that feels, unbearable to think about could be a reality. For you, what do you think we could do differently as a society when it comes to grief and talking about grief?
Well, I definitely think we need to do a much better job, much, much better. Um, for me, like when I first put my book out there and I started getting comments back from people, I was completely overwhelmed by those comments. And it made me just, it really solidified my view that we need stuff like this in our world, whether it's, these podcasts like you guys are doing, all of the other important work that you do, creative works, all of those things. We need this because in our world, grief is so often just misunderstood. It's kept quiet, it's dismissed and feared, as you said. Um,
Mhm.
and, it's kind of quite staggering that people so often feel alone and isolated in their grief, even though it's a universal experience. And, there are so many people who are under these false impressions of how grief should look and feel. And I just think that mostly we don't do a very good job of supporting people who are grieving. We just expect them to be okay. We expect them to be the same person they were before, but that's obviously not possible. And
Mhm.
we just need to do better at supporting people. And sometimes that support means just sitting with them in their pain, not even necessarily saying anything, just bearing witness, just sitting there in the silence with them, just to be there. And I think people are afraid of that, a lot of people. There do seem to be some people that just intuitively get it, even if they haven't suffered loss themselves. This is what I've kind of discovered. Um, and one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people are kind of hesitant and shy or awkward, even, if the name of somebody who's passed is brought up. They look down, they feel uncomfortable, they think, oh no, like what's going to happen, is she going to become upset, it's very obvious that they're uncomfortable. And then, they purposely don't mention something about somebody who's passed or something like that, and because they're worried, like it's not out of a meanness, it's out of a worry that they're going to trigger something. But when you've lost somebody, you miss them all the time. There's, there's nothing anybody says is going to, I don't know, it's not going to make that worse. You're not going to miss them more because of something somebody said. But being able to talk about the people that we've lost, to say their names, to remember them, um, it helps us to keep them here a little bit, right? It keeps their memory a little bit. So I think we just overall we need to talk about grief. We need to share our experiences. We need to find ways to release our sorrow, whether it be through arts, creativity, exercise, like whatever it is that people need to do to release that sorrow, we need to find those ways. And I think above all else, we need to be kind to ourselves and to each other.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree completely. Going back to, you know, being kind to ourselves and to each other and bearing witness to the pain and the hardship and also the joy, the beauty that can come out of those experiences that people are maybe really wanting to share. Like I don't want to speak for you, but in my grief, when people talk about my dad and bring up memories of him, it's like a door gets open for me. I've kept that door shut, and it's like they're inviting me to say, oh, hey, it's okay for you to talk about him.
Right.
And, I agree with what you're saying that the world needs that right now. We need those spaces where people feel like, it's safe to do that and that people care, you know, they want
Hmm.
to sit with you in those feelings.
Absolutely.
And I'm struck by both of you and, the fact that you've lost such important family, family members. And, again, when I think about sometimes, others' misconceptions, is that potentially sometimes folks think, well, a person passes away and, that relationship ends permanently. And while I can understand it figuratively, I bet you both would speak to the fact that a relationship has continued. You don't get to reach out and hug that person or speak with that individual, but your the years that you have spent with these people goes well beyond the date for which they passed away. Is that a fair statement?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, we carry these people with us, right? Their energy, our memories of them, they're just there. And I think one of you had mentioned that the love doesn't go away. It's still there. You still have the love for that person. It's just that you have to find different outlets for it.
Mhm. Yeah, and how could that love go away? And just as, the very last page of your book of this the end and the beginning, that new normal you mentioned earlier of you're stepping into this unknown. Yes, it's the end of that person being here with us, and yet they'll still be with us, in our DNA and also in all of the memories that we've shared.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, Jennifer, you know, on behalf of Rebecca and I, it's been so wonderful getting to hear about your story and to also bear witness to the emotions that pop up for you, knowing that it's not easy doing this. It's not easy having to share that story over and over again. So we really acknowledge kind of the emotional labor that goes into these chats. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And, in hosting this podcast and, we wanted to end and we're hoping to do this for each guest that we have, um, with asking what does a brighter day look like for you and what keeps you going for those brighter days ahead?
Okay. Well, there's lots of bright days. There's that gratitude again, right? Um, Brighter days for me are like obviously when I see all the the love that I'm surrounded by with my family and that, seeing them happy and joyful, those are brighter days.
Mhm.
Being able to have the conversations that I've been fortunate enough to have with people about my book and hearing that it's helping them. I mean, that's a brighter day for me because it's what I set out to do, right? So, like I said, to know that in some small way, my work being out there is helping others is like a huge bright spot for me. And I'm really, really grateful to have that opportunity.
Mhm. Yeah, that's huge. That's the meaning to come out of really big losses, the complex and also the ones that might have been anticipated too.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. And it's a real privilege to be in a space with somebody who's doing what they can, to make the world a brighter place.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks both of you for having me on today and for doing the very important work that you do. It is much, much needed
Mhm. Well,
and
thank you.
very difficult, I'm sure.
Yes, you're right. Um you captured that very well, that it is difficult and there's gratitude there. It's very rewarding to create those spaces. And we will be hosting our annual Lifting the Silence Walk. It's held every year on World Suicide Prevention Day, September 10th. And it's a memorial walk that we do every year in Victoria Park. This year it's from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And we encourage folks, whether that's you, Jennifer, and your family, or those that are listening, to come on out because we're hoping to create that community, of people who get it, where you don't have to put on that mask and justify or, shove down those feelings of grief, that they're welcome there. And together we can acknowledge and honor those that we've lost to suicide, and find some comfort um, and some peace together. So, for those listening, that's happening again on September 10th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. in Victoria Park, and we hope you can make it out.
Pray for good weather because it's an outdoor event. But again, we just want to thank you, Jennifer, for being with us and being so open about your experience. I also want to pay gratitude to my dear co-host, colleague, and friend, Elora, who always brings so much joy to our meetings and joy to my life. We are going to take the opportunity now to officially close this segment of Brighter Days. We do hope that you will tune in next time where we bring a new episode, a new journey to talk about to this platform. Thank you so much and all the best.